Today we are joined by someone who has lived through every wave of product and design and still keeps evolving with curiosity. Our guest, Nick Cawthon, has spent more than 20 years at the intersection of UX, design and product strategy. He's been an independent consultant, an educator and a thought leader, helping teams from startups to global companies rethink how they design and build. In this conversation, Nick opens up about what it really takes to stay relevant in a world where tools change every 6 months, why curiosity is the most underrated skill for product leaders, and how to set healthy boundaries with technology so it serves you, not the other way around. If you are a product manager, founder, or tech leader who sometimes feel overwhelmed by the pace of change, this episode will remind you that thriving isn't about knowing it all. It's about staying curious, flexible, and human.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Product and Cake. Today, as always, as you can imagine what my next words are going to be, we are in the virtual recording studio, and here with me is Paul. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Ghonche. Welcome to our studio and also welcome to our awesome guest. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hello, Paul. Hello, Ghonche. Good afternoon.
We are so happy to have you because, again, a lot of experience here in the studio now and a very interesting view on what changed in the industry and what will change. And we are so curious to learn more from you, Nick. You are currently principal working in your own company, right? But you have a long history of very interesting positions. And we are so keen to dive into that one and to learn from your experience. But first of all, we need to start with an icebreaker question, right? Because this is how you want to start a good meeting. And Nick, what boundaries have you set to ensure that you unplug from work?
Ooh, that's a good one. I am fortunate enough to have two young boys, one 13 and the other one 9. And all they want are devices and switch twos. And, it started at an early age, these glowing screens. And why wouldn't anybody be attracted? It's like moths to a flame or mosquitoes to a light. It's these beautiful devices that show every idea and concept imaginable. But however, I believe that there's a balance here in our household where there's consumption and there's time for consumption, but there's also creation. And to understand the use of technology and consumer devices as creation devices. Ghonche and Paul, I'm sure in your career, at one point, you got really good at creating things using devices and technology and laptops. And if your relationship with these things was only consumption, your outcomes may be very different. So I know this is a long way of answering a very simple question, Paul, but it's an icebreaker and I'm chiseling through one hammer at a time. So what we do is we give them Kindles, e-readers, audiobook readers, and headphones that they can listen to whatever story they want. My eldest is now going into high school, and we've gotten him an e-ink phone where you can text and you can go onto Discord and you can have an email address and a phone number and all these things that come with a digital manifestation of being. And I think these are very important technology skills to have as a younger person. However, watching YouTube on these things is not great. And it's purposefully so. I want to rewind them as much as possible to archaic technology so that they struggle with, and this isn't, all consuming. This is something that kind of sucks. So that's how we do the relationship with the kid. I've installed a device on our router called Firewalla, and it allows you to block domain-specific content on the internet. So nothing from YouTube unless you explicitly say, I want to unblock YouTube for a half an hour so I can learn how to fix a lawnmower, or I can, research something. So to try to set those boundaries around what we consume so that we may create better and have relationships with our devices that are productive rather than reductive. Long answer, simple question. Thank you for asking it. I hope we broke through the ice and are now in the Arctic waters of the Product and Cake podcast.
I have now so many more questions, but maybe that needs to go into the podcast, Kids and Technology. But before we do that one, Ghonche, what about you? How do you ensure you unplug from work?
So I also want to similarly answer my answer to what how Nikki started with a big difference. I am fortunate enough to have a really cute dog, and he makes me want to unplug from work and spend more time with him, take him out for a walk and play with him. So I maybe during COVID or even before COVID, I had a much more unhealthy relationship with work, that I took work to everywhere. I worked like a literal workaholic. But after a certain point, even during COVID, I became to create a much more healthy relationship with the work that needs to happen at work, and the work or the creation and the creativity part, as Nick also mentioned, that is not necessarily related to my job, but related to other things that brings me a lot of joy, like this podcast, like other side projects. How about you, Paul? What do you do?
Yeah, I feel that it also takes a lot of work from my side. What works is multiple user accounts in my computer, right? I mean, I want to unplug, obviously, but our whole lives are connected so hard to smartphones and to everything. But having two accounts on my computer and really switch user from work to private, and then no work-related stuff is logged in automatically and so on and so forth, helps a little bit. But I have to admit that is not the perfect solution, and I'm still working on it.
Notification management is something that I don't think we concentrate enough on. Is just the distraction of attention for meaningless things. So this happened early on with sort of push retrieval of email versus explicitly go check my email and let me know if I have any new messages, back when email was a novelty. And now it's sort of evolved into push notifications where every app wants to get your attention every now and then. So to turn those all off. And then when you have a ride share coming to pick you up, you just sort of look at it and know that it's something different. And so that I think that kind of attention management is extremely important as well.
And there are studies out there that shows that your IQ is significantly lower, even though your smartphone is on your desk. Mm-hmm. So even though if it is in the same room and you know it's in the shelf and not on my desk, it lowers your IQ because this training we got the last 20 years is so deep incorporated already in our brains. It's crazy. And we will discover that in a strange way, I guess.
We were fortunate enough to do a remodel of some of the places in our house, and our entryway had a sort of a cabinet, an empty cabinet space. And we built in device drawers so that when you come into the house, the phone goes in the device drawer, gets charged, and the drawer gets shut. And it's not until you leave the house do you need to unplug it, put it in your pocket, and go away. Yeah, because that way it stays out of your hands. And most importantly, it stays out of your bedroom. Yeah. Because bringing technology into your bedside, whereas it's nice to watch TV in bed, I get that. But the need to check your phone to see what time it is, there are things called alarm clocks that have been doing a wonderful job for generations. And I've returned back to a very analog bedroom environment just to keep my attention focused on the most important thing, which is sleep, and hopefully increasing my IQ as well.
Okay, that is super great. I will definitely copy that idea. But we are using Sonos, for example. What about you? Do you have any smart speakers or a sound system that is only controllable through smartphone?
Can you use a voice assistant to tell Sonos to play certain things?
Yeah, maybe that would be an idea.
Yeah, I do have a voice speaker there by my bedside, and I can turn off lights with it. That's really the main purpose. Or broadcast messages. As I mentioned, there's two younger human beings that are scurrying around the house after hours. And when you give the Google Assistant the message to broadcast, it will take whatever voice you dictate to it and broadcast it in the 12 smart speakers that are also throughout the house. Things like shut up and go to bed or turn off the bath water or things like that. And so that's the main interaction with technology, is yelling at the smart speaker instead of yelling at the children.
That's so funny.
Nice.
All right. Now that I think the ice is fully melted, Nick, for those who don't know you, how would you explain your job?
Yeah, my job is constantly changing. For those that don't know me, I'm like a duck. On the surface, it looks perfectly calm, but underneath there are these wild feet flapping as fast as possible just to maintain some sense of progress and balance. And that's been, I think, due to working in technology. Paul and Ghonche, you know well enough that this industry eats itself every 6 to 12 months. We have a new technology, a new challenge, a new product, a new tool, and we've always got to constantly adapt. Those are the feet moving below the surface. And it has been something that as you get older, you've got to be able to stay up to date and adapt to what the current environment is, what the waters are dictating. And so for those who don't know me, know that as it's so wonderful to be an independent consultant and entrepreneur, to have that sense of control in my professional life, it also comes with a lot of anxiety of like, you've got to stay up to date. And I think that's going to allude to a lot of what we'll talk about over the next 20 to 25 minutes, is what's changing and what's new and where the dynamic is. But it does come with a lot of effort. So despite being cool on the surface, there's a lot happening underneath.
And that is a beautiful picture. It reminds me also very much on LinkedIn. Everything is super cool and chilled and super successful. And below the surface, everyone is pedaling like crazy in circles.
Yeah.
So how is your day-to-day look like? With how many people do you work? Mm-hmm. What is maybe the project you like the most at the moment you are working on?
Yeah, small teams. It is small teams of 2 or 3, usually multidisciplinary. We'll have a strategist or a researcher that helps us understand insights if the client allows it. By allowing it, I mean, if the project dictates it. There's also an engineering focus. We partner with front-end developers so that as the designers are starting to understand more design development workflows, if we find ourselves in a code base or a repository where a branch we need help and assistance with, we have that balancing. And so those projects tend to be, over the span of 3 to 6 months, anywhere from ideation to prototype development, mixed method strategy research. There's really been a range, especially as you sort of try to advocate outbound of, I'd love to do this kind of work, versus inbound of what people want work to be done. What's interesting to me now, to go to the second part of your question, is the use of generative tools for all of these cycles, where, the design community has been centered around a tool called Figma for the last 5-10 years. And that seems to now have been called into question, where if there's the ability to work within a code repository and shrink the gap between design and development, why not take that leap and understand how you can better enable faster product development rather than staying in this world of comfort and familiarity to really push forth and try to improve outcomes that way. So that landscape over the last 6 months has been changing rapidly, of how do we think of ourselves as designers and where our role is, how do we relate with product teams. And so I've seen a lot of shift and examination in our community around that.
That's really interesting. And how did you end up here? How this is your role? How are you now between this intersectionality?
Yeah, I think that, to be able to have good visual skills, I look at my 2 kids, and one is this extrovert, performing arts, center of the stage. And the other is very tactical and visual and procedural, has fine motor skills and high level of concentration. I look back at what I was like as a young kid and what skills I had. And there were some early moments. And it's kind of funny when you think about, your formative years, as they call them, is that there were moments that may have lasted 10 or 15 minutes. And in my case, it was sitting around a table of young kids drawing, and looking at my drawing and looking at theirs and thinking, like I really took care and focus and thought in this. And I looked around and nobody else seemed to have that emotional investment in this, just like, mom giving to kids paper and pens and saying, be quiet for an hour. And that memory really set me into a direction of do things with the visual arts and do things that, involve balance and hierarchy and scale and things that, at the time there weren't these interpretations of this medium on devices or computers. This was in the mid 1980s. And so how I got here were these moments of reflection of, this isn't bad. I don't mind doing this. And back to your question, Hachi, is that there was also a moment in maybe 2008, 2009 where UI became UX, and this user experience thing became an extension, not just of the designed artifact, not just of the drawn page, but in the relationship we have with technology. And that gave us designers an opportunity, should we have taken it, to talk with other human beings and to say, well, how do you think this button should be? And where do you think this is going? And how did that make you feel? And that was wonderful because up until that point in my career, it was all about the presentation and the visual. And that sort of, that component of our discipline hadn't really been pushed to the forefront. But UX really is only 10, 15 years old as a concept. And I was more than happy to take that. And as you hear with some of these adjacent disciplines or professional services of mixed methods research and data visualization, things that bring out the human stories, that's always so much more fun than trying to design the pixel perfect page.
The shift is really interesting from having people who are designing it to people who really think about how to use it. I can relate a lot to that. And maybe all this AI movement will push you now even more forward, because now you not even can talk about how it should work and should move and so on, but you can tell the computer, okay, do it. We can talk about a little later if the computer is doing it or not. But before that, with all the experience you have and most likely this huge amount of projects and stuff, what's a misconception people have about what you do?
Now that is a good question. What misconceptions? Wow. That I'm going to do it the same way every time. The best thing I got from art school back, in my early 20s was that you can do the project any way you want. There was a word I heard yesterday called thinglessness. And that the misconception is, oh, you do this thing. And like, well, no. To abide by thinglessness suggests that you make it up every time, and that deliverable may not be the one that you expect. And that was the case with my most current engagement. At the end, the junior level product manager says, so where are the Figma comps? And no, the goal was to develop a product to the point where the development team, the front end team, could take it off and implement it. And the thing coming into the project was Figma, because that's how designers communicated and expressed product concept. But the landscape had changed, and Figma was now something that became almost obsolete. Its integrations with prompt-based tools like Cursor, its lack of integrations with those, and its lack of integrations with GitHub repositories in which the front-end code base was created from. And so using generative tools, you can take that code base and use it as your language model, set guardrails so that any kind of development doesn't conflict with the package.json file that's currently being used, and use that as your design tool, making prototypes that understand variables, logic, conditioning, branching. Figma is a horrible prototyping tool. It has no kind of replication of what an experience on the web is supposed to be. And that's what it's designed to do. And so if you can bring these prototypes as close as possible to real life, constraining the version of React that the development team uses and Tailwind and all of these sort of assimilations of what the end product is going to be, that again, and I mentioned this earlier, that reduces the gap between design and development. So the misconception for us and what we do was that we're going to do the same thing every time, Whereas going back to the duck feet underwater, I think the approach is that you've got to understand where the landscape is and be able to bring yourself to a better sense of productivity by reinventing the tools every time.
Yeah, and considering all of these things, and I would like to know what is the biggest challenge you're tackling with at the moment.
Paul, you had mentioned in our preamble, education. That's, you might tell from my profile, is that there's a lot of teaching and extended education that goes on as really just how I was raised, as well as, where I like to play. I mean, a part of trying to be innovative and trying to stay adept is connecting with the young generation of those who are coming out of university and out of school and as junior levels, and they teach you what's new and what's relevant. And so one of the challenges are that their jobs are in jeopardy. This most recent product that I mentioned with the prototype development, I had hired somebody out of my alma mater who spent the last 4 years using Figma. And within 2 weeks of this job, we had to put that tool on the shelf and she had to learn a whole new workflow. And so I have the utmost confidence of those who are coming into the discipline as being able to relearn or rethink or reimagine what UX is going to be and what demands those are going to have. And so I think a challenge is going to be, how do we transfer that knowledge? How do we provide them working environments and projects for which they can learn? And, to your extension, how do we educate them, whether it be cohort-based learning or corporate training? And the product leaders need to understand and accommodate that, hey, what you thought you knew with regards to your department, how you're organized, your workflow, how you work with the engineering teams needs to be reexamined. And so communicating that and developing a curriculum around that is going to be a challenge over the next 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months is very ambitious.
From
our European standpoint, I would say let's take 2 to 6 years until we accomplish that. But I would also like to add the perspective of being open for the technology, because it is so easy to say, oh, damn it, what, I should learn a new tool and workflow now in just 2 days. Okay, I give it a try. The AI is doing something crazy. And I say, no, I will stay with my Figma workflows that was building my career until now. And it will continue like that. This AI will go away again, or it will get better, but it will never do my job. And I think that is wrong. And you need to find the culture of experimenting and accepting and be some kind of curious of what is possible and how is that helping us to concentrate on the things we want to do, right? And achieve more. Mm-hmm. And we have a constant discussion about AI and creativity, and especially from your design standpoint. Of course, AI is bringing you closer to the implementation, and you can have much faster clickable stuff and working apps and so on and so forth. But how is AI shaping your role in the perspective of design and coming up with new ideas?
Yeah, significantly. I think you had a lot of good points of reflection in that last passage. One is that, this hype will go away. And we see that in San Francisco because people are trying to raise money. And if I can use the words blockchain, NFT, Web 2.0, on and on and on and on, every 6 months, you just hear these new sort of technology terms. And after a while, you kind of roll your eyes and say, like, do I need to learn this tool? Or do I need to learn this? Because if I wait 6 months, it'll go away and there'll be a new crypto. There'll be new technology or something like that. And however, I'll stop there and say this feels very different. The impact that this will have across many different industries is going to be widespread. This is not just for developers. This is again, I don't like speaking in hyperbole, but this is going to be as impactful as what we saw with the digital transformation wave of the early 2000s, when we had process that was pen and paper. And the Microsoft offices of the world says, no, you can use spreadsheets and Word documents, and you can make these software tools replace the handwritten notes that your businesses run on. And that there were those who adopted it and there were those who stayed behind. And then the same thing happened maybe 10 years ago with cloud-based computing, where you don't need a file on your desktop anymore. You can put these things into the cloud. And I've had the fortune or misfortune of working with some people who said, I don't trust it. I don't trust that cloud. Maybe it was in its infancy of its technology and I've lost a file or I can't find it. And it gives me better comfort if I see that icon on my desktop and I know my work is stored there. And, which is a totally abstract concept because it's still just pixels of light on the screen, whether it be on a cloud or on your hard drive, that permanence is fleeting. And so now I see the same thing, the issues of trust and faith and, ethics of what these new generative tools are going to be. And do you have the, Paul, curiosity to say, how does this fit into my workflow? Right now, we're seeing a lot of hackathons and demos and Pomodoro timers. And look, you can make this one-off thing. And then you go back to work and think, how am I going to use this in my day-to-day workflow? And that's where I'm really pushing and seeing those kinds of conversations happening of, okay, you need to integrate with the code base, you need to set guardrails, you need to have an understanding of impact and cost. And for design teams to be able to bring in the humanist aspect to how it's going to be used, how do we have measured feedback, or where do we use those same kind of skills that we make good products from and apply them in this environment.
From your perspective, what's an overrated versus underrated way AI is used today?
I've been asked seriously this week. I've been married for 23 years. I've been asked seriously this week, do I have an AI girlfriend? Do I have a personal companion that provides me emotional support when I need it? I would put that in the overrated category. I just like not having technology by my bedside. I don't necessarily need a prompt-based girlfriend. I don't know if that's infidelity. Does that count? Who knows? Maybe when she can live in the smart speaker and read to me at night to get me to fall asleep. He or she, whatever your distinction might be. So I will put that in the overrated category. Underrated category is what's happening with platforms like Anthropic and OpenAI is that we saw with the advent of mobile phones in, again, 2010, this sort of notion of app stores where we have these devices and we can all do these things. And now let's try to gain market share by letting everybody into the pool, entrepreneurs like yourselves, and say, you can build on these platforms. You can extend it and integrate it however you want. If people adopt our, in this case, language model, and in that case, hardware operating system, that we can gain more users that way. So it's a model that we've seen before. And underrated is, what does that start to look like when we can all build off of what's going to be an exponential curve of adoption for the OpenAIs, the Anthropics and of the world. So I think that's going to be an underrated play for us entrepreneurs, is to try to leverage the growth that's going to be happening on these platforms.
Yeah, I fully agree. I also today in one of the meetings I had, I compared the AI and the wave it brought more similar to iPhone. But then after reflecting a little bit more on it, I can even compare it to the creation of internet. And I think it will, we are looking at tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot more left in it, that we are just looking at all the cutesy things on top at the moment. And I think there will be a lot more in-depth use cases that will come out of it. And that I agree with you, that we are looking right now a lot on this overrated online girlfriend, and then people comparing it with the movie Her, and all of that is quite going wild at the moment.
Yeah. We saw a year ago at this time people posting on LinkedIn, at least my algorithm, with images or text, and they would label it, I created this with AI, and they would put it on LinkedIn to kind of show off that they had mastered this new tool, but also virtue signal and sort of give transparency of this image or this passage was something that I didn't write. I just prompted and then regurgitated. And it was weird because you had this flag that people were waving of A, they didn't know how that would go with their followers or their relationships with people, and B, that they were excited this new tool. Now, fast forward a year later, who knows what's being generated or written with AI? It's now just accepted that you're using that and almost expected that the content you create is some way assisted using generative tools. And so we're seeing these acceptances in society manifest themselves in really different ways.
Yesterday got on LinkedIn, got a birthday celebration message from someone that I didn't know. I've never talked to this person. Yes, this person is a connection, but I don't really know this person. And it was half of an essay long, this celebration. 100% sure this person did not write it themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. The job market's also very weird. All of the stuff that's happening with the employment and HR and trying to have an application viewed by a human being. It reminds me of trying to get support from DocuSign, which was about 4 hours of my day yesterday of like, I was receiving double billing on one of my plans. I was like, I needed a human being and I couldn't log into the portal for whatever reason. And there was just nobody there. And I think that the job market is going to be like that for a while. And so for those of you younger people that are looking to get into full-time work, find where the human beings are, whether it be networking or universities or where are live human beings. And that's how you'll get your interviews and your applications. It's not going to be through randomization because that'll make you go crazy.
All right. Now is the time for our rapid fire famous yay nay game. Are you ready?
I am ready. Yay. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So the way that we do it is I say a statement and then you need to say if you agree with it, yay, or if you don't agree with it, nay. And the first one, the design team prepares and presents fully polished designs without involving the product managers during ideation.
Nay.
Do you want to tell us why?
That's a hard nay. I think at some point, the design team should realize that the product manager has the same tools they do. And if the product manager understands the technology and the constraints better than the design team may be out of a job. So the more that the design team can talk with product and say, hey, here's how we should proceed. We need some requirements. We need some definitions. That's how they'll play together. But to think that the design team's going to do this aha moment and say, voila, here's the design, is dangerous for everybody involved.
And also the time is over that you present something, you printed it out, you put it on the wall and you say, hey, look, it's done. No, you want to release every day, get it in the hand of the users, be super, super fast, having AI agents implementing 60% of it.
I can see that the only condition that I would put is if it is completely out of the box, just an exploration. The designer has an idea and just wants to see it through, just wants to do a design for themselves and then wants to present it. This is not something that gets implemented immediately, but it's just a line of ideation to let the creative juices flow. That I would say that's all right.
Awesome.
All right. The second one, product manager goes to the designer with a wireframe or a low fidelity design.
This happened. This happened last project, and I didn't receive it very well. Partially because we were so far along in prototype development, and that the wireframes were contrary, and so I have heard in my career a dozen times the phrase, I'm not a designer, but, and it's been like, okay, where your value is, at least in the relationship that we were in with this most recent engagement, where the product manager's value was in definition and instruction and requirements. And to say that I'm not going to just do that, but I'm also going to make the visual interpretations of it, didn't play to their strengths. And they were very strong at those things. And so I would hope that as our roles should stay defined, that we play to our strengths. Nay. I'm going to say nay.
Yeah, I also fully agree. I understand that it comes from a good perspective, like maybe the product manager wants to support, and like an image says 1,000 words, etc., and wants to ease the process of communication, but they jump hoops into solution rather than staying in the problem space and letting the expert of a topic tackle that, and with a free mind go about understanding the problem and then coming up with a solution. What do you think, Paul?
I think in general, it's a good idea if you find yourself saying, I am not this and that, but then you should stop immediately and rephrase maybe into a question or into a suggestion on sharing your perspective or your feelings. But if I am an engaged product manager and I just talked with a bunch of potential clients and I want to give my ideas, right? Because they are in my brain, they feel so perfect. I really oversee everything. So what is the perfect way to deliver that great knowledge, that diamond out of my head into the design team then, if I'm not allowed to give a wireframe?
Whiteboard sessions where you're co-creating. Visual representation should not be the exclusive domain of designers, but there should be a sense of, hey, I've got these concepts that I want to sketch with you, because that's what we do. We're visual, we sketch, just like the little boy with the piece of paper. And so those kind of co-creation sessions make your ideas better, because as you're getting them down, you can find somebody who's very adept at this to take them out and make them better and get them to a point where you both agree much quicker than it was like, I'm going to spend 4 hours really crafting and struggling with this, and then I'm going to present it to you. It's like, no, say, let me have an hour of our time, and then we can do this together. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. All right, last but not least.
Okay.
There needs to be 100% feature parity between mobile and web, mobile and desktop version of a product.
Another good question. Are we going to ignore the context of use for somebody at a desktop device and say it's just as valid to ignore context of mobile use? I'm going to say nay. I do a lot of internal tools for B2B technology companies that require transfer of data from many other tools, meaning I'm grabbing stuff out of spreadsheets and I'm throwing them into this SaaS platform, or I'm going through Word documents and parsing and understanding parameters and then putting them into this SaaS platform. And to say that that's something we expect someone to do on a mobile device is swiping and jumping into a spreadsheet and long clicking, menu pops up, select all, copy, swiping up, going back into the SaaS platform, finding the field, clicking, pasting. That's not a workflow that people are expected to do on their phones from an employee standpoint, and B, isn't a pleasant user experience. So, no, I think I think that's something we should understand the context of use. And I maybe gave you an easy example of these internal tools. Think of like cybersecurity, people trying to understand threats and the noise that creates, and the need to have a keyboard and copy and pasting and really sort of transferring data and moving in between tools. Those lend themselves to a desktop environment, not a mobile one.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What's your perspective, Ghonche? Do we need feature parity?
Depends. I agree with the context of use 100%. You cannot expect the user on a desktop to have the same mobility as a user on an iPhone. As an example, if you want to post a listing on Kleinanzeigen or on Craigslist, eBay, wherever, you take your phone, you go and take a photo of it, and then you can post it. You cannot have that functionality on desktop. But what is important to have is the functionality to add a photo to a listing. no matter on desktop or mobile. The context and the concept, how it is implemented, needs to be different, but the ability to do certain key functions need to be there. Unless the whole product doesn't make sense to have a mobile version.
Yeah.
You don't need mobile version for everything.
Correct.
Yeah, that is maybe an endless discussion that could last forever. From the technical perspective, I would really vote for not blocking it the hard way, right? Or don't do technical decision that will make certain things impossible because the product manager or the designer is saying right now, oh, no, we don't need it. I really did my research. I'm pretty sure nobody wants to do it on smartphone. And boom, tomorrow someone is coming and saying, hey, I really need that functionality. And you want to make sure that you did not any hard blocks here. So when going into implementation, then maybe accept that everything will change. That was my wisdom. And Nick, I would like to ask you if you could give every product tech person one reminder for this week, what would it be?
Paul, you had a great aspect of curiosity. Like I would remind them to stay curious about what tools they're using, what the different organization is going to be changing, the departments and how that balance is going to be. And so flexibility and curiosity, I think, are two emotions to have. So that take a something you've maybe read about or heard about and not quite touched yourself, and go in and explore and see how it might impact your workflow, if not today, but in the future. And ask a coworker of like, hey, what are you seeing with this? And where do you think it might be? Because it's going to be something that you work on together. And that could be everything, user research to generative tools to product market fit, or these kinds of concepts. I mean, there's just so much out there. And the more that we can help educate ourselves, I think the better off we'll be.
I love that. And you can also train it, right? Connect with your curiosity and keep your brain in that mood and not try to be biased already with the whole overboarding, complicated situation we are all in general.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us on the podcast. It was a pleasure talking to you. Where can people find you?
You can find me on gauge.io is my consultancy. You can also find me on LinkedIn. The last name is Cawthon, Cawthon. I'd love to connect with you and hear more about what you're working on. Yeah, great talking to you, and I hope to see you soon.
And of course, you should follow the podcast on LinkedIn and in your favorite podcast player, because there are so many more topics we need to tackle more or less soon. So thanks, Nick, again.
Thank you, Product and Cake.
Enjoy the day. Bye.